So to the NFL, there was a story over the weekend with Shemar Stewart and the Cincinnati Bengals. The coverage of this story has bothered me, and I'll explain why. Because Shemar Stewart has not been doing anything wrong, and now he's signed his contract, and he's in, and Shemar Stewart was middle first-round pick for a terrible defense and a talented pass rusher, and they needed Shemar Stewart to get ready, right? And they needed Shemar Stewart to be there. Okay, fine. And then the Bengals are like, we want to put language into your contract that is not in any other first-round picks contract, that was not in our first-round picks contract for last year, about what guarantees get voided if you get in trouble for stuff that happens off the field. And Shemar Stewart's agent was like, no. Why are you doing that to my client? Do you think Shemar Stewart's going to get in trouble? And they're like, no, we just want to protect ourselves. And then the owner, Mike Brown, came out and he said some version of, I don't think I should have to pay a guy if he's in prison. And it's like, well, whoa, do you think Shemar Stewart's a troublemaker? That's not fair at all. And he's like, I'm not even saying that. He's like, I just think that that's bad precedent. So the Bengals are trying to set a precedent, and Shemar Stewart's agent doesn't want to acquiesce to a precedent because he's trying to sign next year's Shemar Stewart, right? He's like, why would I get the next guy if I gave up guarantees and protections that were collectively bargained and that sort of thing? So, and it ends up reportedly he got an extra $500,000 on his signing bonus early, and, they worked it out, and it cost him a few days of training camp, and it cost him some bad headlines. The Bengals side of this is an organization that has the perception of penny pinching for a defense that was terrible after signing T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, that has a Super Bowl-ready offense under contract in its prime. Why would you nickel and dime with your first-round pick? What are you doing here? That is reasonable. And I'm not sitting here and telling you it's not. But Trey Hendrickson is not even with the Bengals in camp. And Trey Hendrickson wants to get paid like Myles Garrett and TJ Watt, and the Bengals are like, your sack production is there, but your overall production isn't, and you're not as crazy of an athlete, and you were a great player on a bad defense. Those guys have been on better defenses, and you're a year older, and so we'll give you 1 year of guarantees, and he wants 3 years of guarantees, and so he left camp. And Trey Hendrickson is greatly outperformed his contract. And so really all the Bengals have done now is sign Shemar Stewart and change defensive coordinators. But here's how I feel about contracts. They are the lifeblood of these guys' careers because they play the most violent sport with the least guarantees. Baseball contracts are guaranteed, basketball contracts are guaranteed, and the injury rate in football is way higher than those other two sports in terms of injuries that can end your career. So they are fighting for every dollar they can get, and they know that a team can cut them. Look what just happened with the Raiders. They're like, well, something happened with Christian Wilkins and how he's recovering from an injury, so we are going to void your guarantees, and you can file your grievance, and we'll see how it plays out. Maybe Christian Wilkins will win, maybe the Raiders will win. But that's why these players obviously fight for every dollar they can to be guaranteed. But, and this is maybe a little fourth wall, taking you behind the curtain a little bit, but because the NFL is so popular, and everyone gambles on it, and everyone plays fantasy football on it, on shows like this, it can drive the conversation in the way that regular season basketball can't, that regular season baseball can't, that even playoff baseball sometimes can't, depending on the markets and the stars involved. So, what's a good way in July to get us to talk some NFL? Oh, man. Terry McLaurin and the Commanders are upset on their contract. Is Terry McLaurin worth what A.J. Brown got? How can the Commanders pay Deebo Samuel but not Terry McLaurin? And then do you know how the story always ends? With the player signing the contract. All the time. In a post-Le'Veon Bell NFL, players don't miss games. It's incredibly rare. Chris Jones missed one game, and he had rings on his finger and was dominant in a Super Bowl, and he showed up to the game with his agents on either side of him in the box. Like, that was a big story. And he missed one game and the Chiefs won the Super Bowl the year that he held out and missed the game. Teams now have so much money, and there is so much money at stake for the players that eventually, like you see it in free agency, the best players and the biggest names don't leave in free agency anymore because basically every team can sign their guys. The Bengals are regarded as cheap. I will be floored if they don't sign Trey Hendrickson. And that means that the cheap Bengals will have signed Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson all to market deals at premium positions. So contracts have a way of getting resolved. And players are supposed to be upset during the negotiation because the teams are supposed to try to lowball them during the negotiation, and then it eventually works out. Micah will be in Dallas, Hendrickson will be in Cincinnati, McLaurin will be in Washington, and is it necessary? Does it rankle some guys? No, it's not necessary. Yes, it rankles guys. But you know what? Let's bygones be bygones. Getting $38 million to rush the passer. Have a tendency to forgive and forget a little bit. I think I got a pretty good idea how this next story is going to end, but it still doesn't change any of the drama. Micah Parsons is going to stay in Dallas. But it's lovely to see that there's 31 teams in the NFL, and then there's just a television producer. Because as a content guy who loves the NFL year-round, I feel like all of us, everyone who sits behind a microphone, should have to write a handwritten thank you letter to Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. Because love them or hate them, we all have an opinion of how they do business and why they are just still so relevant and compelling despite it being 30 years without a championship. And so over the weekend, Micah Parsons, who doesn't have a contract, apparently has a little back tightness, but is there at training camp, just not really participating. Jerry Jones, because for some reason the owner of the team needs to face the fans at training camp with a bunch of cheerleaders behind him, had to come out and say whatever he was saying about the new and improved team, and he was greeted with chants of "Pay Micah, pay Micah." And then he talked to the media afterwards, and he was like, well, the chants for paying CD were louder last year, and, you know, we paid Dak Prescott, and then he got hurt. He can't help himself because this is what he does. And Dak Prescott last year said, I just kind of stopped listening to Jerry, which is a bold thing for a quarterback to say about the guy who signs his check. But that was last year. CeeDee Lamb, just last week, when talking about Micah Parsons and these contract negotiations that are playing out as publicly as any contract negotiations in the NFL, he was like, yeah, we just don't play in those waters with the media and Jerry Jones.
Obviously, playing this media game with Jerry is not the best. It's not fun. It's not recommended. But as for Micah, he knows what he brings to this table, honestly, for this team, for himself, and he should get what he deserves. And I'm not indulging in any of the craziness that they got going, but I do want Micah to get paid soon.
And he will get paid soon. We all know how this ends. This is just noise. Last year, Nick Bosa got paid, and then Max Crosby got paid. And for a moment in time, oh my God, Myles Garrett was going to be traded from the Cleveland Browns. He wrote a nice letter and everything. And then Myles Garrett became the highest paid non-quarterback in football, and he wants to be a Brown for life. And for a while, I'm old enough to remember 3 weeks ago when TJ Watt was really unhappy with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh man, they were far apart. They weren't going to get it done. And then, voila. It's amazing what $41 million per year to rush the quarterback and lose wild card weekend can do to a guy's mood. And all of a sudden, TJ Watt, back with the Steelers, thrilled. Micah Parsons will be a Dallas Cowboy. He will get another contract. He will top TJ Watt's $41 million per year. My guess is by a decent amount, actually, just given the age difference. I don't think it's going to be 41.2 or 42 million. He'll probably try to get to 44, 45 million a year, put some distance between him and the other pass rushers. And I'm sure that's the sticking point in the negotiations right now. But I think we would be, let's call it a media literacy test here. I think we would all be served to actually pay attention to Jerry Jones. And I know it's a bold strategy, and CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott have said they're trying to do different things, but I don't play quarterback for the Cowboys. Jerry Jones saw how this country was enamored with The Last Dance. And he said, I got to get me one of those. And he struck a deal with Netflix to produce a multi-part story of the Cowboys. And it's coming soon, and we'll see what America's appetite is for a long-form documentary on America's team. It will not be as popular as The Last Dance because we're not in the middle of a pandemic. But they were popular in the 90s. The Bulls were popular in the 90s. I'm sure it will do quite well. But when the trailer came out, there was a little snippet from Jerry Jones that I actually was like, there it is. Thank you. This is a soap opera 365 days a year. That is his business model. That is why they're not in the biggest market, but they're the most valuable franchise. They don't have the most wins or the most Super Bowls, but they're the most valuable, most talked about franchise. He believes, and frankly, has been proven right, that the soap opera is what sells. He's the owner, but he's also the general manager, but they absolutely have a general manager in Will McClay. Like, nobody believes that Jerry Jones is scouring Senior Bowl tape, but he wants to call himself the general manager. No owner in the NFL calls into local radio every week. No other owner in the NFL does a post-game press conference every week. They played it out with Dak Prescott. They played it out with CeeDee Lamb. They played it out with Micah Parsons. What does that do? Back in the day, we would say it filled column inches. Now it fills airtime. Because then Micah Parsons has a podcast, and he weighs in. CeeDee Lamb gets asked about it. That makes a news cycle story. The fans chant something at him. That's a news cycle story. And on and on and on. Jerry Jones is competitive. Jerry Jones wants to win. He just also wants to be the most talked about. You don't hear the Rooneys or the Maras or the McCaskies or anyone else doing it the way that Jerry Jones does. But Jerry Jones's team is worth more money. So he probably looks at it like, this might cost me a few $1,000,000. And that stinks for a Cowboys fan who wants to maximize the salary cap. But he's like, the column inches and the airtime more than makes up for it because people are talking about the Dallas Cowboys. It's a soap opera 365 days a year. Those are his words, not mine. Again, 31 teams and a television producer. And it's been the highest rated TV show in the NFL for the last 30 years.